Everyone, it's Father Sean back here on the couch chat. So first one back in the couch. The convent here at IC's gone through its renovation, and it's just absolutely fabulous. So I want to thank everybody who helped in this renovation. Schnipple Construction did it. So thanks everybody for all your great work. Just an absolute blessing to be here in this new renovated space. Especially I'm recording this today on, what is it, September the 6th, which is the first night of CCD. So we'll be ready in time to welcome all of our young men and women who are going to learn about our Lord and His church here in this place. So it's just an absolute blessing. And one of the things that's kind of been on my mind recently, just in regards to so many things of life, is last Sunday's gospel. So last Sunday's gospel is the one where Jesus says, if you want to be my disciple, you must pick up your cross and follow me. And there's so many ways to reflect upon the cross, but also a lot of times when we pick up the cross, it involves difficulty. It involves us leaving things behind, whether it's leaving people behind, whether it's leaving jobs behind, or whether it's, burying a loved one that we love so dearly. And so often when the cross is involved, so is loss. And that happens so much in our life that loss is really difficult to manage. And especially thinking about this in some ways in terms of all that's going on in our archdiocese through the Beacons of Light, there is a whole lot of loss. And how do we deal with that? How do we acknowledge that? How do we move with the losses that we have? And a few years back, I watched a video that's still out there that the Amazing Parish group did for basically parish leaders to help people, to help their parishioners go through different losses. And as some pastoral council members or staff members watched that so many years ago, there was even this sense of like, ooh, that's actually helpful for my own personal life too, because loss is part of our personal lives also. And, as I want to kind of go through, they named 7 kinds of losses, and just to talk about those a little bit, so to maybe even just give us a sense of acknowledging what our own losses are, whether it's in regard to parish life, but also in regard to our personal lives, in regards to our families, whatever it may be. So in the example I thought about using was 3 or 4 years ago when my parents moved to Georgia. And it was a bit of a loss for me. It's not, don't use that as an example as there's any bitterness or animosity or anything like that. It's just a real loss that I learned how I had to learn, and still in some ways I'm learning how to deal with. So the 7 different kinds of loss, right? So the first one they name is turf. Or we kind of have our own space. You even think about this in a job. If all of a sudden you have to share an office with somebody, it's like, well, this used to be my turf, this used to be my place, and now there's somebody else here. Or even a couple that's moving in together for the first time after their wedding day. Somebody, if it's a new house, somebody's losing some of their turf, whether it's closet space, whether it's countertop space, whatever it may be. There's even though it's a good thing, there's loss there. Or even in parishes, losing an office or something like that. There's a real loss there in the turf. So the second one then is attachments. And a lot of these are attachments to people. You've been with somebody for a long time at work, and all of a sudden they retire, they take a new job, and it's like, wow, I really miss that person. I miss the relationship that we had. And that happens in a parish, whether it's staff members move on, or even priests change. So there can be a sense of loss, losing the attachments that we have to certain people. And that's not easy. And then there's a future, right? Sometimes somebody's worked at a company for a number of years, and then all of a sudden they get let go, and they're like, I always kind of thought I'd retire here. This was the future that I had planned. And this can happen in our own lives. Or a lot of people retire maybe, and they have these plans of how they're going to spend their retirement, and then health issues come up. And so this future that we had in mind that we wanted to live is all of a sudden no longer present. And so it's how do we deal with the loss of the future that we had in mind? The fourth one is control. So we have our own little things that we get to control, we get to kind of keep things in order, and all of a sudden we don't anymore. And so how do we deal with the loss of control, loss of like ownership, or even the seeming control that sometimes we had? I realized that I said I was going to use the example of my parents going to Georgia, but I haven't yet. And I can't think of anything with the loss of control there, but definitely the loss of attachments, the loss of kind of a future of always going there on a day off is part of that. In parish life, the loss of control can sometimes be in regard to finances, right? As we're working on this merger where we think, well, we did have this control, and now maybe we won't have the same sort of control. How is all of this going to work? It's a real loss to acknowledge. And then the fifth one would be a loss of identity. You can even see this in couples that are moving in together or who are getting married. The wife, although she is normally excited, always excited about getting married, sometimes there's a loss of the last name. You get to grieve the loss of, well, this was always my identity, this was always my signature, this is always how it's always known. And although it's a very good thing, there's still a loss of identity. In parishes, there's this, I was always a member of this parish, and now we're part of this new thing, and what do I do with this new identity? How do I grieve the loss of the old one and yet still keep part of it there? It is a real loss, and one that we kind of have to deal with. Meaning. So meaning is the sixth kind of loss that they mention. And so we get great meaning in what we do. You think about maybe somebody who works in insurance, and they get a lot of meaning of helping people who are in times of crisis. Somebody's car breaks down, they have a disaster at home, they're able to be there, the person who helps. Then you no longer work that. It's like, wow, I always kind of identified as somebody who can help. Parents who are empty nesters for the first time. All of a sudden they've gotten so much of their meaning out of being a mom, being a dad, and now there's no kids to take care of. And there's a whole sense of loss of like, this was my purpose, this was my identity, this was how I lived every day for so long. What do we do without this meaning of our lives? And the last one is structure. We've got a regular rhythm to our lives, whether that means some places have a mass schedule that changes, or I know my own structure is I was thinking every day off, or maybe at least 2 or 3 times a month, I would go down and have dinner or hang out at my parents' house. And that was part of the structure they just saw my life taking. And then, that changes, and you got to figure out how to deal with that. So loss is part of life. I get the cross right behind me here over my shoulder, and of course that's the way it was for our Lord. And loss isn't easy. And somehow when we're dealing with all these losses, we've got to figure out the middle ground between a couple extremes. Maybe on the one extreme would be to just act like it's not a big deal, or to say, just get over it. And we can do that in so many areas of our lives. We just say, it's time to move on. But then there's another extreme of enabling, of this, yeah, it's okay just to sit here in loss and not move. And that's another issue. So what's the middle ground of acknowledging the losses that we experience and yet allowing the Lord to show us how to pick them up, show us how to carry them and move forward. And so just to run through those 7 losses again. So there's turf, attachments, future, control, meaning, identity, and structure. So those are the seven kinds of loss that were mentioned in this video that I watched, that I found helpful in my own life, and even helpful in talking with parishioners and kind of identifying what the pain is. So maybe this is helpful. I think next week, maybe do a little bit of a follow-up video about how do we deal with losses, how do we help others deal with loss, and that's right, not just parish life, but that's the entirety of our life. So anyways, Father Sean for the Couch Chat. Great being here. Hopefully everybody has a very blessed first night of CCD tonight. God bless.